Hi, this is Michael Rubin, and we're going to take a left turn. We've been working on the Mixolydian scale, but I had a vision this week. One of the main things I think is very important about all this music theory stuff is to know your major scales. But more important than knowing your major scales is to know, for example, that in the key of C, C is the first note, D is the second note, E is the third note. So each scale has 7 notes for a major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then do is the repeating note at the end. And you can number each one of them. And this is very valuable because a lot of musicians talk in numbers. They'll say, okay, the melody goes 3, 2, 1, and you're expected to know what that means. Or it's important because you've got a lot of harmonicas and it's very difficult to memorize all of the harmonicas. But if you know that in straight harp, 1 blow is the 1, 2 blow is the third note in the scale, C, E, C, D, E. Or in cross harp, 2 draw is the 1. Cross harp is G on a C harp in the key of G. G is the first note, 2 draw is the note G. So whole number 2 draw is a 1. So knowing the number values really helps you communicate, but it also helps you listen to music. Very few people have perfect pitch. That's the ability to hear that that's a C, the same way you could see that this shirt is white. Very few people have that ability. Most of us have relative pitch, which is the ability to distinguish high from low. Also within relative pitch is the ability to hear the number value of the note. So if the note is the third note in the scale, after a while you begin to learn, no matter what key you're in, no matter what note is the third note in the scale, it has a personality that is easy to recognize. The personality of being the third note in the scale. So, for example, if I'm listening to somebody play, I may not know what note they're playing, but I'll be listening and I'll say, oh, they're playing the third note in the scale. Well, what key are we in? Well, we're in the key of C. What's the third note in the key of C? E. Where is E on my C harmonica? 2 blow is E. I'll play 2 blow and I'll sound like I know what I'm doing. So it's much easier to recognize those number values than it is to recognize what an E sounds like. So knowing your number values is extremely valuable. So one of the things I struggle with as a teacher is how to get people to know their number values. And I was working with a student the other day, and we were going over what we're doing is at this point is playing in every key on the chromatic. So we'll pick a new key and then we'll say, okay, let's jam in that key. And so one of the questions I say is, what's the 1, 4, and 5 chord for this key? So for example, if you're in the key of C, the 1 chord is C, the 4 chord is F, and the 5 chord is G. And the way I got that is because in the C major scale, C is the first note, D, E, F is the 4th note, and G is the 5th note. Now a chord is more than just one note, but the name of the note has a number value that can be found in the major scale of whatever key you're in. And we've talked about this before in progressions. And the 3 most likely chords that are played in any type of music, any type of song, is the 1, 4, and 5 chord. So what I go through with my students is being able to quickly identify the 1, 4, and 5 chords. And this student really started showing me that he knew his 1, 4, and 5s very well. And I said, how are you doing this? And he said, I've memorized the circle of fifths. So let's look at the circle of fifths. C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp, A flat, E flat, B flat, F, C. So it's kind of like a clock. There's 12 numbers or 12 notes in the Western scale, and there's 12 numbers on a clock, so C's in the midnight spot, G's in the 1 o'clock spot, etc. Now, it's called the circle of fifths. Why? Because as you move clockwise from C to G, the way I got to G is because G is the fifth note in the key of C major. C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then as when I move clockwise, I go to D. D is the fifth note in the key of G major. And all this stuff we've talked about before. Now, one thing that I know I talked about, but that you may need a little refresher in, is as we move counterclockwise, you move up in fourths. So what I mean by that is start on C and go counterclockwise, you get to the note F. F is the fourth note in the key of C. C, D, E, F. Therefore, as you move clockwise, you're moving in fourths. You're moving in fifths, and as you move counterclockwise, you're moving in fourths. So in the key of F, B flat is the fourth note. In the key of B flat, E flat is the fourth note. So what this student had done is he memorized the circle of fifths clockwise, like I had read out loud to you before, but he also did it counterclockwise. C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, C sharp, F sharp, B, E, A, D, G, C. That way, when I said, we're in the key of C, what's the 1, 4, and 5 chord? He knew that C was the 1 chord. He moved counterclockwise. F is the 4 chord. And back to C, clockwise, G is the 5 chord. So let's say you're in the key of A. A is the 1 chord. D is the 4 chord, counterclockwise. Back to A. E is the 5 chord, clockwise. So A, D, and E are the 1, 4, 5 in the key of A. So by memorizing his circle of fifths, he had an easy way to know the 1, 4, and 5 chord. Now, I don't remember the exact moment what exactly happened, but I had a flash. I saw a connection, and that's a very exciting thing. And that's part of what I enjoy about theory so much is the longer I work at theory, the more I see how it's all connected. And it's exciting when you see a connection. So remember, the question is, how do you know the number values in the major scale? Well, now we know the 1, 4, and 5 by knowing the circle of fifths. Well, that's pretty good. But what about the 2, the 3, the 6, and the 7? We're missing that. So, if we don't want to memorize our major scales, which I really recommend you do anyway, I thought, how else could you do it? And this student, knowing his circle of fifths, guided me. Because what I realized is there is a pattern of moving in whole steps and half steps that will tell you how to find the notes in a major scale if you can't remember it. Remember, from C to D is a whole step. From D to E is a whole. E to F, half. F to G, whole. G to A, whole. A to B, whole. And B to C, half. So you could we've talked about this pattern before. 1 being the root of the scale, up a whole step, up a whole, half, whole, 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 half. Well, let's look at this numbers pattern, let's look at this half step and whole step pattern and give each one of them a number value. So the first note is a 1, up a whole step. The second note is a 2, up a whole step. The third note is a 3, up a half step. The fourth note is a 4. You see what I mean? Now if you look at this, I want you to notice where the half steps are. When we move from the third note to the fourth note, that's a half step. That means that the third note is a half step away from the fourth note, 1 note difference. The seventh note goes up a half step to the 8th note. Now remember, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What I'm trying to say is that the first note is do, or 1. The last note is do, or 8. They're both C. Therefore, 1 and 8 are the same note. So not only is it a half step from 7 to 8, it is also a half step from 7 to 1. Okay, so we know that it's a half step from 3 to 4 and a half step from 7 to 1, or 7 to 8. 8 and 1 are the same. Well, if we know everything else, by the way, everything else is a whole step. From 1 to 2 it's a whole step, from 2 to 3 it's a whole step, 4 to 5 it's a whole step, 5 to 6 it's a whole step, and 6 to 7 it's a whole step. So there's only 2 places that are half steps. Remember, a half step is moving 1 note on the keyboard, a whole step is moving 2. Okay, well we know our 1, 4, and 5 because of the circle of fifths. So let's say we're in the key of C. The 1 is C, the 4 is F, and the 5 is G. Well, I want to know the 2. What's the second note in the key of C? Well, moving from the 1 to the 2, is that a half step or a whole step? Well, there's only 2 places that are half step movements, 3 to 4 and 7 to 1, or 7 to 8. Same thing, the last 2. And therefore, since this is not one of those 2 movements, from 1 to 2 is a whole step. If 1 is C, which I know from my circle of fifths, and I go up a whole step, 2 is D. Let's try it with a more complex key. Let's say the key of E flat. The 1, 4, and 5 is going to be E flat, go counterclockwise to the 4th, A flat, go clockwise to the 5th, B flat. Now I'm trying to get to the 2. It's a whole step higher than the 1. The 1 is E flat, go up to E, go up to F, because there's no black key between E and F on the keyboard. 2 is an F. Now, let's try and find a 3. In the key of C, we know the 1 chord is C and the 4 is F and the 5 is G. Well, 3 is pretty close to 4. It's just before 4. So how far is it from 3 to 4? It's a half step. Therefore, if 4 is F, 3 is a half step lower than F. E. 3 is E in the key of C. Let's try it in the key of E flat. If 4 is A flat, what is a half step lower than A flat? G. In the key of E flat, 3 is G. Let's try and find a 6th note. In the key of C, we know the 1, 4, and 5 is C, F, and G. What is 6 close to? It's close to 5. It is after 5. How far is it from 5 to 6? Well, since it's a half step from 3 to 4 and 7 to 8, and this is not one of those distances, therefore it is a whole step from 5 to 6. If 5 is G, a whole step higher than G, G sharp A is A. The 6th note in C is A. In the key of E flat, the 5 is B flat. Go up a whole step, B flat goes up to B, B goes up to C because there's no black key between B and C. Therefore, the 6th note in E flat is C. Let's try and find a 7th note. In the key of C, we know the 1, 4, and 5 are C, F, and G. What is 7 close to? It's close to the 1, because 7 is just before 8, and 1 and 8 are the same note. How far is it from 7 to 8? Well, it is only a half step, because that's one of the 2 places. 3 to 4 and 7 to 8, or 7 to 1, is a half step. If 1 is C, 7 is a half step lower than C. What is a half step lower than C? B. In the key of E flat is the 1. 7 is 1 half step lower than the 1. What is a half step lower than E flat? D. So therefore, the circle of fifths can help you find the 1, 4, and 5. The 2 is always a whole step higher than the 1. The 3 is a half step lower than the 4. The 6 is a whole step higher than the 5. And the 7 is a half step lower than the 1. And there you have the full scale. Okay. Next time we'll go back to Mixolydian scale. All right, thanks very much. Bye-bye.